Wyatt stood at the edge of a fractured bulkhead, the metal beneath his boots torn between two identities, the corroded bones of a dying warship and the sleek rebirth forced upon it by alien design. Light pulsed through the floor, veins of shifting data crawling across the surface, flickering between human engineering and something far older. The corridor ahead stretched into shadow, every step carrying the weight of choices made long before his time. Behind him, 5 figures moved in silence, their weapons ready but their faces hidden behind angular helmets grafted with makeshift sensors and scavenged targeting nodes. They weren't part of the original crew. They weren't Resistance regulars. They were the ones left after too many others had died staple followers, named for the way they clung to the ship itself, patching their gear with scraps torn from its hull, modifying their bodies with whatever technology hadn't killed them first. The ship's hum shifted pitch, a low vibration rolling through the metal like a distant growl. Wyatt didn't turn to see if the others felt it. They all did. The black ship was awake now, no longer just a vessel, but something alive and aware. Its memory held names no human could pronounce, battles fought in languages that burned the mind to understand. The staple followers had no orders to follow, no chain of command beyond survival itself, but they knew one thing: the ship had chosen Wyatt. That made him the spearhead whether he wanted it or not. The corridor split ahead, one path leading deeper into sections reclaimed by living metal, the other into zones still broken and unclean, where rot and rust clung like infections that refused to die. A shadow flickered down the left passage, limbs too long, head split into 3 uneven sections. Wyatt raised his rifle. The staple followers mirrored him, barrels tracking with mechanical precision. No words passed between them. None were needed. This was not just a hunt. This was reclamation. Every inch of the black ship had to be retaken, cleansed, or broken apart until nothing remained that could turn against them. The ship's rebirth had triggered something buried deep within an ancient protocol, part weapon, part warning. Whatever waited inside the heart of the vessel wasn't just alien. It was something that had learned from the first time humanity fought and lost. Wyatt moved forward, the staple followers closing in behind him, their boots ringing against the floor as the ship watched its own fate unfold. Wyatt moved, each step measuring the weight of the rifle in his hands, the pulse of the ship underfoot, and the unspoken tension radiating off the staple followers trailing behind him. They weren't soldiers, not in the clean sense, no uniforms, no rank insignia, nothing that tied them to any structured command. Each wore a personal ruin stitched into their armor, a patchwork of salvaged plating and exposed grafts where flesh had been replaced by whatever the ship offered in desperation. Closest to Wyatt was Ravox, her left arm almost entirely replaced by a fused amalgamation of human bone and alien alloy, the metal shaped not by a surgeon's hand, but by the ship itself when it had dragged her half-dead body from a collapsed deck 3 weeks ago. Every finger was too long now, the joints clicking softly whenever her grip adjusted around the makeshift plasma caster she carried. She wasn't the oldest, but her survival gave her presence when she moved. The others adjusted without thought, a silent acknowledgement of weight carried. Behind her, Solon Trail stood taller than the others, not by genetics, but by the skeletal exosuit the ship had forced onto his spine after his lower half had been crushed during a gravity shear malfunction. His legs didn't exist anymore, only segmented metal limbs moved by exposed spinal impulses transmitted through twisted cabling embedded into his back. The helmet he wore was permanently fused to his skull, its visor showing nothing but a faint emerald glow, a sign that the ship fed directly into his brain, filtering the corridor through layers of ancient sensory algorithms that humans weren't meant to see. Dravik was next, small, silent, with eyes that never blinked because the ship had replaced his optic nerves with something scavenged from a dead exokern scout. Every time he looked at Wyatt, the pupils swirled like liquid metal, reflections forming and dissolving too quickly to understand. Dravik spoke in bursts, short and sharp, his words sounding less like speech and more like system commands forced through a damaged interface. The last two, Kayavra and Ilnor, were twins in everything except blood. Both had lost everything before stepping onto the black ship, their bodies remade by its failing medical systems when the outer decks had ruptured during a boarding action. Their skin carried a faint shimmer, a synthetic layer embedded with reactive nanites meant to harden under pressure or fracture into razor edges when struck. They carried identical rifles, tuned not by human engineers, but by the ship itself, weapons that recognized only their genetic imprint and refused to fire if held by anyone else. Each of them had been saved, rebuilt, reshaped by the Black Ship, but none of them felt saved. Every scar carried a memory, not just of pain, but of being touched by something they couldn't fully understand, something ancient hiding in the metal, guiding the repairs with a purpose that had nothing to do with mercy. They followed Wyatt not because he outranked them. That choice, silent and absolute, made him the only one they trusted to lead them through the haunted corridors where the past bled into the present. The corridor bent sharply, and Wyatt halted, raising a fist. The staple followers froze without question, weapons up, eyes scanning the dim glow where the walls flickered between states, human steel shifting to sleek alien alloy, then back again in a pattern that pulsed like breathing. Wyatt felt it under his skin, the ship's attention. Not just sensors tracking them, but something deeper. The way an old predator watches offspring who haven't yet learned to hunt. Ravox tapped her metal fingers against her thigh, a silent code the followers had developed when voices attracted too much attention. Movement ahead. 3 meters. Distorted signature. Wyatt gave a single nod and advanced, rifle raised. The shadows peeled back to reveal a shape hunched over the bulkhead, arms fused into the wall, its skin stretched thin across a skeletal frame remade from both flesh and ship metal. Its head turned slowly, a ruined face split into 3 uneven segments, each eye burning with corrupted data streams, pouring directly from the wall into its skull. It had once been human, maybe crew, maybe someone like them. Solon Trail shifted, his mechanical limbs adjusting his stance with a whisper of metal on metal. Eidolon class conversion, partial failure, neural drift detected. His voice was dry, filtered through the ship's own systems, a voice not entirely his own anymore. The creature spasmed, tearing itself free from the wall with a wet, grinding noise. Wyatt fired first, the plasma bolt hitting center mass, burning through tissue and exposed wiring alike. The others followed, weapons barking in controlled bursts, until the corridor fell silent again, smoke curling from the body's ruined frame. The ship absorbed the corpse, floor plates opening just enough to drag the remains into unseen depths, where they would be recycled into something new. Xayevra exhaled slowly, her breath fogging slightly as her reactive skin shifted back to smooth metal. That's the 3rd one today. They're learning faster. Wyatt didn't respond. He didn't need to. They all knew. The ship's resurrection wasn't just a process of renewal. It was a battlefield in itself, every inch contested between the Black Ship's original systems, the alien code infecting it, and the corrupted crew caught between both. Every fight they won meant the ship changed a little more, and none of them knew which side they were helping. They moved on, deeper into the reclaimed decks, where the walls pulsed with veins of light running in colors no human eye could fully understand. The air tasted wrong, not thick, not foul, but charged, like they were breathing in the ship's own memories. Each step took them past panels that opened without command, revealing glimpses of forgotten battles, frozen faces of long-dead crews screaming in silence before the panels slid shut again. Wyatt knew better than to stop. The Black Ship remembered everything. Every death, every mistake, every betrayal. And now, with its rebirth incomplete, those memories had nowhere to go except out into the corridors where they walk. Solon Trail's visor flickered. Localized time distortion detected. Temporal bleed through Deck 17. Recommend reroute. Wyatt shook his head. We need that deck. We cut through, fast and clean. Ravox tapped her fingers again. Agree. Avoidance means losing territory. The staple followers moved without argument. Their trust wasn't personal, it was survival, built on the understanding that hesitation killed faster than bullets. They had seen what happened when the ship decided a crew member was no longer useful. The walls absorbed the dead faster than they could scream. Deck 17 opened like a wound. The metal here was twisted, warped not by impact, but by time itself, bending in loops, panels showing moments from the past, future, and present all at once. Wyatt saw himself for an instant, older, scarred, his hand replaced by something alien. Then the vision was gone, replaced by a younger face, someone who might have been the first to command the Black Ship before history erased his name. The floor shifted, fragments of ancient battles playing beneath their feet like ghostly projections, human soldiers fighting side by side with figures not entirely alien, but not entirely human either. Allies lost to time, or enemies forced into uneasy pacts. Dravik's voice cut through the silence. Multiple signatures inbound. Non-human. Elevated threat response. They formed a defensive line, rifles up, breath steady. From the far end of the corridor, shapes emerged, not Exelkern, not human, but something caught between. Twisted forms built from scavenged technology and organic tissue, each step a malfunctioning stumble as their bodies rejected their own existence. Wyatt didn't wait. He fired, plasma bolts cutting through the first wave, the staple followers matching him shot for shot, their movements synchronized through shared survival alone. The corridor became a killing ground, bodies falling, walls absorbing the remains as quickly as they fell. But they kept coming, not mindless, but driven, guided by something deep within the ship itself. Wyatt realized then what they were fighting. They weren't just clearing corrupted crew. They were killing the memories the ship couldn't let go, fragments of those who had died to save it, now turned against the living because the ship could no longer tell the difference. He didn't stop firing. He didn't stop moving. He couldn't, because the Black Ship had chosen him. And that meant it would make him its memory too. And memories never leave. The pulse of the corridor shifted not from weapons fire or footsteps, but from the walls themselves, their surface rippling like skin beneath unseen pressure. Wyatt felt the change first, a subtle adjustment in the rhythm of his own heartbeat, like the ship was breathing through him. The staple followers felt it next, their bodies all marked in different ways by the Black Ship's will. Their scars, implants, and synthetic grafts twitched and pulsed in time with the deck's vibrations, as if the ship itself was speaking directly through their nerves. Dravik froze, his liquid metal eyes flickering violently, pupils splitting into fractured spirals. His lips moved, but no words came. Instead, the sound that poured from his mouth was a broken string of system commands, half in human language, half in something ancient, a language built for machinery, not minds. Solantrail turned toward him, exosuit joints locking into a defensive stance, weapon raised not at the corridor, but at Dravik himself. Wyatt's rifle stayed down. He's not corrupted. Solantrail didn't lower his aim. Not yet. The walls shifted again, and a section peeled open like a wound exposing a forgotten artery. Beyond it lay a chamber none of them had seen before, not on any schematic or memory shard the ship had allowed them to access. The room pulsed with dim light, not from electrical sources, but from something growing inside the walls themselves, root-like tendrils pulsing with organic and synthetic energy intertwined. Ravok stepped forward, her metal fingers curling involuntarily, drawn toward the chamber like a magnet. The others followed, weapons raised but steps cautious, as if instinct told them this was not a place for weapons, but for remembrance. Wyatt stepped through last, the weight of the ship's attention pressing heavier with every step. At the center of the chamber, suspended in a vertical stasis field barely holding together, floated a body human in shape, but no longer entirely human. Skin fused with the same alien alloy threaded through the ship's bulkheads, eyes replaced with dark lenses that reflected not the present, but flickering scenes from the ship's own memory archives. They recognized the face, not from personal memory. Kolves, once the ship's first navigator, one of the original crew who had bonded too deeply with the ship's core during its first war flight. Rumor said Kolves never died, not in the conventional sense. His body dissolved into the ship, his consciousness fused with the navigation arrays. What stood before them now was neither man nor ghost, but something in between, a memory given flesh, a fragment of the past dragged screaming into the present. The stasis field shimmered, and a voice poured into the chamber, not from speakers, but directly into their skulls. You are lost in your own creation. You walk the same loop we walked, following the same orders, making the same mistakes. Wyatt stepped forward. Then tell us how to break the loop. Kulves' head turned sharply, the sound of bone grinding against metal filling the room. Break the loop? You are the loop. Every step you take writes another layer into the ship's memory. Every command you give feeds the cycle. The black ship doesn't want freedom. It wants closure, and it will bury every one of you inside its skin to get it. The walls trembled, and the floor beneath their feet shifted, panels sliding apart to reveal layers of bodies entombed beneath the deck, not alien invaders, but former crew. Each one fused into the ship itself, their faces frozen in silent screams, their hands stretched toward the surface, as if trying to pull themselves free. Sever's voice broke the silence. Why show us this now? Why not before? Kulves' hollow eyes flickered with fractured starlight. Because you found it. The one who wasn't supposed to survive. Wyatt's chest tightened. Who? The one the ship couldn't rewrite. Before anyone could process the meaning, the corridor behind them erupted into motion shapes pouring from the walls, not corrupted crew, but preserved figures wrapped in layers of alien alloy. They weren't attacking. They were protecting, forming a perimeter between the chamber and the rest of the ship. Weapons aimed outward, faces locked in identical expressions of grim resolve. Solentral's visor flickered. Recognition pattern detected. These were original crew. Long-range security division. Presumed lost during first contact event. Ravox scanned the perimeter. Then why the hell are they here? Because they were protecting him. Kulves' voice bled into theirs again. The only one who left the ship and came back without being rewritten. The only one who remembers what this ship was before the war corrupted its heart. From the far end of the chamber, a second figure emerged, not from stasis, not from the walls, but from a doorway none of them had seen open. His armor was stripped of insignia. His face was hidden behind a visor that pulsed with the same emerald light that flickered in Solentral's skull. But there was no mistaking the posture, the way his hand rested casually on a weapon shaped like nothing the followers carried. The visor lifted, and the face beneath it was human-scarred, hollow-eyed, but unmistakably human. My name was Raylon once. Before this ship took my name, my past, and my future. Before I became its memory. Wyatt lowered his weapon, but the tension in his grip remained. You're the one they were hiding. Raylon's eyes locked on Wyatt's. They weren't hiding me. They were hiding you from me. Because I know what you're about to do. And I know what happens if you succeed. Ravox took a step closer. What do you mean? Raylon's smile was cold and empty. If you reach the core and win, the ship dies. If you reach the core and fail, you become part of the loop. Either way, none of you walk off this deck alive. Wyatt's voice stayed even. Then why are you still here? Raylon's hand hovered over his weapon, but he didn't draw. Because there's a third path. One none of you have seen yet. One the ship buried so deep even it forgot. I came back to show you that path. But you're not going to like what it costs. Solentral shifted, mechanical limbs flexing. What cost? Raylon stepped closer, his visor flickering with ghosted faces human, alien, everything the ship had ever fought or absorbed. To break the loop, one of you has to become the next Kulves. One of you has to stay behind and let the ship rewrite you completely, not corrupted, not consumed, but willingly fused. One human mind to guide the core directly. No crew, no captains. Just one voice speaking for the dead. Dravik's voice was barely a whisper. Who decides? Raylon's expression didn't change. The ship already chose. It's Wyatt brought you here. All eyes turned to Wyatt. Raylon's hand finally dropped to his side. Congratulations. You're not just the commander anymore. You're the next ghost. The corridor shuddered, and from somewhere deep inside the ship's heart, a pulse rang out, not mechanical, not organic, but both. A heartbeat and a death knell fused into one, and the only way forward was through that pulse. Through the choice Wyatt had never been given and could no longer refuse. Wyatt felt the silence sink into his bones. It wasn't the silence of peace or stillness, it was the weight of too many choices stacked behind a single breath. The others were staring at him, but no one spoke first. They all knew. The ship had already decided. Ravox shifted her grip on her weapon. There has to be another way. The ship's memories aren't perfect. They loop back on themselves. There's always gaps. Wyatt's voice stayed low. No gaps this time. You all felt it. The pulse. The ship's not asking. It's telling. Solon-Trail's servos whined as his stance tightened, like a machine bracing for impact. We didn't fight through half the Dominion fleet just to throw you into the core like a sacrifice. Wyatt almost laughed, but the sound caught in his throat. This isn't a vote. It's biology. The ship chose me the second I stepped foot on this deck. Every time I gave an order, it was listening. Every time I took a breath, it was measuring. Dravik's head twitched, his neural graphs flashing unreadable code across his skin. Then why not rewrite you already? Why the show? Why drag us all here if the choice was made? Wyatt's fingers tapped the side of his rifle, a nervous habit from a life before the Black Ship, before wars and the Void rewrote what survival even meant. Because it doesn't just want a mind. It wants a willing mind. The ship doesn't trust its own ghosts anymore. Too many layers of betrayal in its metal skin. Severus stepped closer, visor up, her human eyes sharp under the flickering chamber lights. That's not consent. That's coercion. Wyatt shook his head. It's war. No one gets clean choices out here. Raylon leaned against the wall like his bones had turned to sand, voice dry but steady. He's right. The ship won't force him, but it'll make sure the alternative's worse. Wyatt met Raylon's eyes, searching for any trace of something human left behind that mask. And what's the alternative? Raylon didn't blink. The ship breaks containment. Every system, every weapon, every corrupted fragment of its past spills out into real space at once. It doesn't just die. It takes half this sector with it. Solon-Trail's hands curled into fists. That's not a choice. That's a hostage situation. Raylon's mouth twitched in something too tired to be a smile. Welcome to command. Wyatt stepped forward, past the others, until he stood face to face with the stasis chamber where Kolves still hung between life and memory. The ancient face stared back at him, neither inviting nor condemning, just waiting. What happens to me if I do this? Raylon exhaled, shoulders dropping. You stop being you. The core overrides your name, your past, even your body. The ship uses your neural map as a base, but it layers every past commander on top of you. Kolves, Vadran, every ghost who ever gave an order inside these walls. You don't die, Wyatt. You become all of them. Ravok's voice was sharp. That's not command. That's erasure. Wyatt forced himself to smile, but it felt like breaking glass. That's command on this ship. Dravik's voice cut through the static hum filling the chamber. What if we refuse? What if we take you and run? Find an escape vector. Abandon ship. Raylon's face darkened. You think the ship hasn't planned for that? It won't let you leave. It'll fold space in on itself and swallow you whole before you clear the docking ring. There's no outrunning something you're already inside. Wyatt looked at each of them, the crew that had bled beside him through countless battles, the ones who had seen him at his best and at his absolute worst. They weren't just soldiers, they were the last threads of his sanity, the only proof left that he was still human. Then we do it here, Wyatt said. No ceremony. No speeches. If the ship wants a willing ghost, it gets one. But we do it our way. Kiavra's jaw tightened. What does our way mean? It means I walk into that core chamber alone, and you lock the door behind me. No one follows. No one tries to pull me out. He swallowed hard. You all get to live. Solon-Trail's voice turned cold. You expect us to just walk away? Yes, Wyatt said softly. That's the only order I have left. Ravok's hands shook, and it took her 2 tries to holster her weapon. You think we fought this long to lose you like this? We are the Black Ship, Wyatt. Not just you. Wyatt shook his head. No, you're the future. I'm just the past catching up. The walls groaned, as if the ship itself acknowledged the weight of those words. Lights flickered in patterns none of them could read, but the meaning was clear. The ship agreed. Dravik's implants buzzed with incoming data. The core's opening a direct link. It's ready. Wyatt stepped back from the chamber, turned to face them one last time. When this is over, I need you to do something. Ravox spoke first. Anything. Erase my name, Wyatt said. From the logs, from the archives, from the war records. Make it like I was never here. Let the ship have my memory, but no one else. Solantral's voice was almost too quiet to hear. Why? Wyatt's smile was broken, edges frayed. Because I don't want to be the reason anyone hesitates next time. This fight doesn't end with me. It ends with whoever comes next. They stood in silence, the truth too heavy for words. Finally, Raylon stepped aside, the door to the core chamber sliding open with a low, mournful hum. Wyatt took a breath not to steady himself, but to remember what it felt like to breathe his own air just one more time. Then he walked through the door. The lock sealed behind him. Inside the core, the walls were alive veins of liquid data pulsing through the metal, faces flickering in and out of the surfaces, every commander who had come before whispering through the dark. Kulves stood at the center, arms open, waiting. Wyatt stepped into the light. The ship's voice filled his mind, not words but memory, sensation, regret, and hunger fused into one. Are you ready? Wyatt closed his eyes. Not even close. The core's light swallowed him whole. Outside, the crew stood shoulder to shoulder, staring at the sealed door. No one spoke. No one moved. For the first time in the Black Ship's history, the command deck stood empty, no captain, no orders, only silence. Ravox broke it first. What now? Raylon's voice was soft, distant. Now we wait. And if he fails? Kaevra asked. Raylon's eyes flickered with ghosted light. Then we become the next ghosts. No one argued. The Black Ship trembled, somewhere between a death rattle and a new breath. And the war went on. The core chamber wasn't a room, it was a living breach between what was real and what the ship remembered. Every step Wyatt took reshaped the floor beneath him, metal plates warping into something like liquid thought, refusing to hold a single form. The walls ran with fragmented images, some from battles Wyatt knew by heart, others from wars that predated humanity's first step into space. Kulves didn't speak. The ancient commander's face flickered in and out like a broken projection, his body fractured by layers of overlapping identities, Vadran, Kralis, Captain Doran of the First Spire Revolt, a dozen more Wyatt couldn't name. They all occupied the same frame, each ghost jostling for dominance like a corrupted memory file, trying to reconstruct itself. Beneath Wyatt's boots, the deck pulsed with unnatural gravity shifts, dragging him forward, pushing him back, forcing him to recalibrate his every move. It wasn't malfunction. It was the ship's way of deciding if his body could endure what was coming, if his flesh could fuse with the neural storm without burning through. Wyatt reached the heart of the chamber, where a suspended sphere rotated slowly in midair, its surface neither metal nor energy, but something caught between. It pulsed in patterns that made his skin crawl, and as he raised his hand, the sphere unfurled like a blooming flower, revealing a core of shifting code, engraved directly into physical space. Command Exchange Protocol active. Neural imprint required. Biological host confirmed. Wyatt. The voice wasn't the ship. It was something older, something built into its bones before the war even started. The ship's original creators long dead, but never truly gone. Wyatt didn't flinch. Take it. Whatever you need. Just leave enough of me to finish this war. The sphere extended countless filaments, thin as hair and glowing faintly, latching onto his skin, burrowing beneath the surface like living circuitry. His mind split open, memory and data colliding until there was no line between the two. He remembered his first deployment, but through Colves's eyes. He remembered giving the order to abandon a colony, but felt Vadran's guilt layered over it. He remembered dying, again and again, each memory feeding the next until death itself became irrelevant, just another reboot cycle. The ship spoke directly to him now, no longer using words but sensation. It poured its innovations into his mind, technology beyond comprehension, systems so advanced they bordered on magic, each one chained to a price paid in blood. Neuroconstruct folding, entire command hierarchies compressed into a single brainwave signal, transmitted across light years in milliseconds, allowing Wyatt to issue orders to every surviving human fleet without ever leaving the core. His mind became a living relay, every thought shaping the war in real time. Gravimetric divergence nodes, experimental weapons that turned localized gravity into weapons, crushing enemy ships under their own mass or folding spacetime into razor-thin event horizons that shredded hulls like paper. Adaptive phase cloaking, not just invisibility, but temporal displacement, allowing the black ship to exist half a second ahead of real space, effectively untouchable until it chose to strike. Morphic Ghost Protocol, a final contingency if Wyatt fell, his consciousness could fracture into the ship's walls, possessing individual systems, even controlling entire decks independently, making the black ship a haunted weapon no enemy could ever truly kill. But there was a cost to every innovation. Each technology was built on failures, thousands of dead crew, shattered minds that couldn't handle the interface. And Wyatt felt every single death they poured into him like molten metal, until his every breath carried the weight of every sacrifice the ship had ever demanded. Outside the chamber, the crew felt the shift. The lights dimmed to a deep crimson, not an alarm but a heartbeat, the ship syncing itself to Wyatt's pulse. Ravox's visor flickered with unreadable data, symbols not meant for human eyes crawling across her display. Solantrail's implants shorted for a moment, sparks dancing along his neck, his body momentarily possessed by the ship's raw signal burst. "What the hell is it doing?" Raylon's voice was flat. "It's rewriting him." The walls of the command deck rippled, transforming into interfaces, none of them recognized panels built for hands with too many fingers, controls that responded to thought instead of touch. The ship was no longer adapting to human crew, the crew was being forced to adapt to the ship. Ravox slammed her hand against the nearest console. "We need to pull him out before." The ship's voice echoed through every corridor. "Extraction denied. Command protocol in progress." Dravik staggered, his neural graphs glowing white-hot, data overload forcing him to his knees. "It's rewriting us too. We're part of the command lattice now. Every decision Wyatt makes, we feel it." Sever's fingers curled into fists, but her hands weren't entirely her own anymore. The ship's reflexes bled into her muscles, making her fingers twitch in unfamiliar combat patterns, drills from wars that happened centuries before she was born. Inside the core, Wyatt's mind stretched past its limits. He saw through every sensor at once, felt the ship's hull like it was his own skin. He sensed the staple followers, a fleet of ancient human loyalists who had been hunting the black ship for decades, believing it to be a cursed relic that had betrayed humanity's true cause. The followers' ships were ancient, built from scavenged XL Kern wreckage fused with human tech, their weapons a fusion of plasma and dark matter lances that bent physics with every shot. Their lead ship, Pillar of Conviction, was already locking its targeting grid onto the black ship's core, intending to burn Wyatt's mind out of existence before the merger could complete. But Wyatt wasn't just a target anymore. He was the ship. He sent a pulse through the void, not a transmission but a weaponized thought, a data storm carrying the combined memories of every commander the black ship had ever held. The Pillar's crew collapsed where they stood, their minds overwhelmed by centuries of war compressed into a single instant. The rest of the follower fleet faltered, but didn't retreat. Their devotion ran deeper than fear. They activated a device Wyatt had never seen before, a void shard array, a weapon that didn't fire energy but absence, creating localized zones where reality itself fractured, slicing the black ship into isolated fragments, each piece stranded in its own pocket of disconnected space. The crew felt it immediately. Ravok's voice broke through the static. We're being carved apart. Systems aren't talking to each other. Wyatt's mind bent around the fractures, learning the new rules in real time. He couldn't rely on unity, so he embraced division. He split his consciousness across each fragment. Engines flickered in and out of existence, firing in sequences no sane navigator would ever attempt. Weapons recalibrated mid-shot, bending their trajectories through ruptured space, turning the void itself into ammunition. The follower fleet couldn't adapt fast enough. Ships shattered under impossible angles of attack, torn apart by firepower that seemed to emerge from every direction at once. But Wyatt wasn't just fighting them, he was learning from them. The Void Shard Array itself was a masterpiece of desperation, a technology born from humans who had been forced to evolve faster than their own understanding. Wyatt absorbed its design into the Black Ship, adding its power to his own, turning their weapon into his tool. The fractures closed, the Black Ship reforming into a single entity, but no longer the ship it had been. It was something new, something that had evolved past even the ship's own creators. The core chamber dimmed, the filaments retracting from Wyatt's skin, leaving behind scars that glowed faintly with alien code. Kolves's ghost faded, the last of his presence dissolving into the ship's walls. Wyatt stood alone, but no longer just himself. Every voice, every memory, every innovation now lived inside him. Outside, the crew felt the shift not just fear, but awe. Ravok's voice was quiet. "What are you now?" Wyatt's voice echoed through the ship, no longer entirely human. The shattered remnants of the follower fleet drifted in silence, their wreckage scattering into fields of molten metal and severed hulls. Fire flickered in the void, but no victory roar followed. The Black Ship hovered at the heart of it all, no longer just a vessel, but a scar left on reality itself. On the bridge, Ravok wiped the sweat from her brow, her fingers still trembling from the neural feedback. Every muscle ached, every implant pulsed like it had been rewired against its will, because it had. The ship's systems had merged with the crew in ways no one fully understood, forging them into something neither entirely human nor entirely machine.